Shall I start? Very good afternoon, everyone, and welcome all of you for yet another session on Doc Mode. And yet another session on Capsule, powered by Doc Mode. Today's session is quite interesting and intriguing. It has been related to the marketing perspective called brand assets. Brand assets mean how your brand look and feel comes up when a customers understand it. We know that in food manufacturing and consumer goods, the brand asset value has been tremendously doing a lot of creative part of it. That makes your brand not only in terms of understanding from the customer standpoint and the longevity of it. We have excellent examples onto it where we can withstand from 50 years. Also, we still remember some very specific and exclusive brands. But what is very important to understand is how brand asset value is really playing a very important role in pharmaceutical marketing also. And to discuss about this important topic, today we have three eminent panelists with us. Uh, First panelist is not require any kind of introduction. He has been a mentor, a teacher, and not only an important part of pharmaceutical marketing in from last more than a decade. I would like to welcome our first panelist, Mr. Vivek Hatangadi, sir, for this panel discussion. Thank you so much, Vivek sir, to be a part of this important panel discussion. As everybody knowing that Mr. Vivek sir have been in the pharmaceutical industry for more than 50 years and is 18 years of pharmaceutical consultant. He has been tremendous in giving a lot of good amount of lectures in different MBA courses and the colleges. He has been a great guest faculty at four pharma management B schools. His latest book on My Mother Was a Big Liar, which is a book of his memoirs of 80% of professionals and 20% his life in school and colleges. I would like to welcome once again Vivek sir for in this very important and intriguing discussion today. Our another important panelist today is with us, Dr. Sudhakar Gaikwad. He's a senior vice president and head McCain Health India. Welcome, Dr. Sudhakar, for today's important discussion. Dr. Sudhakar has 20 years of experience in healthcare advertising and public health communication. Over the years, he has experience across ethical, OTC, medical devices, and public health campaigns. He has been involved in strategically relevant and creatively compelling campaigns for clients like GSK, Abbott, Johnson Johnson, Novartis, Danone, Glenmark, Novo Nordisk, Cipla, Dr. Reddy's, Procter& and Gamble, and the likes. So it's a very wide range of experience he holds about. He is an alumnus of top-ranked Asian Institute of Management, Manila, and was a recipient of scholarship of his Masters in Management program and graduated in top 1 of 3 of class. Once again, Dr. Sudhakar, welcome for this important topic discussion. Last but not the least, we have a panelist from the other side of the industry, from the FMCG industry, Mr. Mustafa Arsiwala. He's a CMO. Hi, Mustafa. Pleased to be a part of this panel discussion. He's a CMO at Britannia Bell Foods. He has more than 17 years plus of experience and brand building and marketing campaigns across diverse categories like food, personal care, and OTC leadership roles. He is currently a Chief Marketing Officer of Britannia Bell Foods, responsible to build and expand the brand's presence in laughing toys and highly competitive marketing dominated by local giants through product innovations. With MBA in marketing, Mustafa Arsiwal has completed 1 year of Stanford Lead program at Stanford Graduate School of Business in 2022-23. He believes that the difference between an ordinary and extraordinary is that little bit of extra passion, enabling him to bring A game at work every day. So, welcome all respected three panelists to be a part of such an important discussion. We are talking on brand assets, a topic which pharmaceutical marketing industry actually requires a lot of hydraulic because what we have also discovered in the current world, the dynamics are changing quite regularly. So how a brand asset becomes a very important perspective of any kind of brand, be it in schedule H drugs, be it in FSSAI drugs, be it in OTCs. Understanding the magnanimity, understanding the important philosophy is a very important part of brand assets and in marketing as a whole. So to discuss about these important perspective, I would like to start from Vivek sir. A very important question: how do brand assets contribute to brand awareness in the pharmaceutical industry? Vivek sir.
That's a very, very, very interesting question. But before I go on to your topic, I would just like to tell my friends in the pharma industry who are listening to me, there are two types of brand assets, the tangible and the intangible. When you talk about the tangible assets, they can be your corporate office, maybe your R&D, your F&D. But what is more important is the are the intangible assets. For example, if you look at brand Coca-Cola in 2022 was valued at $97.5 billion. And that's not because of their tangible assets, it's because of their intangible assets. So for a brand manager, it becomes very, very, very important to build in the intangible assets. Now, what are those intangible assets in pharma brand management? And I would say the first intangible asset is the brand manager himself. You'll be surprised. Why do I say that the brand manager is an intangible? Because he is the intellectual property of the company. And without him, any brand cannot survive. But there is a very, very important catch to this. In pharma industry, a brand cannot be built by a pharma brand manager alone because here the medium of advertising is not the lay press or the TV or other kinds of media. The media for communicating the brand messages are the medical representatives, and just above them are the field managers. It's through these real brand assets, the medical representatives, and the first line managers, you can build a very, very, very strong brand asset. The brand manager on one side, the people working in the field on the other side, they contribute a lot to the building of brand awareness. And of course, when we are talking about brand awareness, it all depends on the kind of inputs which they get from the brand management team. The brand management team has something very, very, very challenging here because unlike other industries, like for example, you take the case of PPIs. Mustafa and Dr. Sudhakar will be surprised to know there are over 3,000 brands of PPIs. You have omeprazole, you have esomeprazole, then you have pantoprazole, and there are various variations. And together, there must be 3,000 brands. When you look at these brands, they don't differ from each other. There's no difference actually between omeprazole, esomeprazole, or pantoprazole. But to make that brand awareness, you need solid efforts. I remember somewhere in the, I think it was 96 or 97, I had come to Hyderabad. And it was not Hyderabad. I had come to Omecity. I still remember at the airport itself, I was greeted by the Omecity, not Hyderabad. So
Yes.
this is the strength of brand awareness. And brand managers have a very, very important role to play here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivek sir, to set the context on regarding how pharma industry treats brand asset point in their pharmaceutical marketing practices. But what is also important is how, like Dr. Sudhakar has been part of both the side of the story, how Dr. Sudhakar you perceive in terms of brand asset in pharmaceutical marketing, and which are the major areas you have identified. These are very good practices which have been done in the past, which can be inculcated again, and maybe some kind of more improvisation can be done.
Well, being on the client side as well as on the advertising side, and associated brands, there are a couple of things which really strike you. First of all, very interesting thing is, and Vivek sir spoke about it, the corporate brand itself. And it's so amazing that it transcends products. Uh, Earlier, I have this experience. I was at a client's place, a leading Indian manufacturer of stents, and the corporate problem he presented to us is when angioplasty happened, and doctors want to go in for a stent. They come out, and the representative from the doctor's team comes out and discusses with patient's relative what kind of stent you require, and they as is customary, they say there are options 1, 2, 3, the price. So there's brand A, brand B, brand C. 9 out of 10 times people go in for a brand, and in this particular case, if Abbott was mentioned as a name, and why would someone do that? They are not even familiar with the brand, right? I mean, they're not familiar with this thing, but they have been interacting with that brand Abbott. And if you see all the Abbott packaging, it carries a heroic A. They also invested in creating some ads, and they are talking, across brands. So first point really is that corporate brand is transferable. Second is, and then Vivek sir spoke about how medical representative is important. Why it is important is he's a medium, and unlike when you put a 30 seconder, you have emotions, you have everything packed in it, and it's perfect, right? It's the way you want it. Your medical rep is a human being. He will interact with the doctor differently at different times. So perhaps the most volatile medium is what you own. So not only it is important to have communication right, but the delivery right, and how do you ensure that motivation and all that. So the second part. So from the corporate you come to person. Then comes how you are detailing. For example, a lot of companies have moved on to digital detailing. The way it is detailed, that also causes the aura which is there, the transaction which is happening, the sampling, the interaction. There are nuances to it. Then comes the product. In product, you could actually, there are times when we have leveraged the manufacturing excellence, packaging excellence can be used as an asset. Largely, if someone tells you 50 years research product, those are resonating. And we have seen a change. I'll take a case of painkillers and antibiotics. The newer brands are not doing as well as the older brands. Why? Because one is the therapeutic rationale which has been built, the proof that is there, and you have to align that. The other part of this is also what experience we have is doctors are also like all of us consumers. So there are early adopters, innovators who tend to write newer products. So it becomes easier. So when you make your marketing plan, when you're coming up with the newfangled technology, you figure out who are the people to go to, because there is no use going to a laggard, because his sense of branding is different. So here I'm talking about brand as a as a brand owner, you're giving message, but as a receiver also that is important. So those are also the considerations that come into play.
Very true.
Now lately we are also looking at how compliance, patient education, those are the components getting into it. We are working with one major company. They are basically into atropine drops, which is essentially slows down short-sightedness. But what program we are doing is really an education program for parents. We're encouraging them to notice whether their children are having problems. So increasingly we are getting briefs in that region where people are thinking of especially the leaders are thinking of how to own the spaces. In this case, eye strain as a space, or for example, what does it take to own vaccination? The baby receives its first vaccination while getting discharged from the hospital, but 6 weeks later when the baby returns, how to own that moment. So owning moment is something which we will see big time in the coming future. Then again, there are also brands which are leveraging services, PSPs. So those also become assets. So there's a wide range of assets. Lately we are also getting learnings from other sectors. I'm hoping that CRM, I'm using it term loosely, CRM is going to be very important when it comes to chronic diseases. Also, most of the activities that were there were largely related to cardiovascular, but right now other sectors, gastro is coming up big time, ophthalm, dental. these are areas where a lot of work is happening. So it's really a rich time for building lots of assets, but primarily corporate brand, the personnel that represent you, the brand, of course, which is molecule, packaging, everything that comes with it, and the choice of media. So this is a package really in terms of assets. So that's from my side.
Thank you, Dr. Sudhakar. I think how you make sure that what Vivek sir mentioned, you absolutely given a deep dive into it. Why? Because what is very important to understand how in the pharmaceutical industry, the tangible and intangible assets can be differentiated. But Mustafa can help us in giving some more interesting angle into it in terms of, let's say, in FMCG, though the basics are same in marketing, but in FMCG, what are the some important component of brand assets which might be very interesting and can be picked from the pharmaceutical standpoint? Mustafa.
Yeah. So thanks, Udit, firstly for the introduction. So I just want to give a small context. Now, today, if you look at the environment in which we are operating at, and I just share one, very insightful anecdote. Today, if
So
you
your
look at
voice is
95,
having some instability. I think there was some
yeah,
unstable
you can hear me
voice.
now. Is it clear now?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So just to give you some insights, if you look at social media, and if we pick Instagram, 95 million photos and videos are posted every day. Now, what does that mean? It means that average person has to spend 1 second looking at each and every photo or video, and he will take at least 3 years to go through the entire video content of 1 day worth of Instagram. So it means that the space is very, very cluttered, and getting attention today from a consumer mindset is the new currency. And that's one of the biggest challenge, where everyone is grasping for. How do you get the consumer attention? And it's not just about attention from your immediate competition, but it's an attention of competition which everything else you're competing with. It could be friends, it could be family, it could be music, it could be different sectors. And to get this attention, what truly matters is how do you capture the imagination, and not just by creatively telling the story, but how do you create an experience or assets around these stories. And that plays a very, very critical role. If you look at within the FMCG structure, versus a pharmaceutical, considering the kind of environment the pharmaceutical operates in, there's a lot of focus on benefits and features, a lot of argument on the functional aspect of the brand. However, if you are not able to grab that attention and recall, the entire efforts get wasted. And what FMCG or consumer goods industry does is they flip the model. Okay, the focus is more on the impact, earning the attention of the busy people. Now, I can give you some examples. Now, if we are driving to an highway, okay, and if you see a yellow M color sign, you immediately, you don't have to look at the vehicle, you immediately recall that it's a McDonald's and let's go and have food there, right? Or for example, if you hear a jingle which talks about ting ting ting, yeah, you immediately recall that it's Britannia. Or even when you see a blue-haired girl on an outdoor campaign, you know consumers see and call it as say Amul girl. So brand assets play a very, very important role in terms of bringing memorability and visual recognition for the brand. And I can give you an example. While we were launching Laughing Cow in India, it was a very, very cluttered space. We were fighting with, some of the biggest giants in India, likes of Amul or Go Cheese. And we were the 10th brand to enter into that particular space. Now, for us, the task was very simple.
I think there is some internet instability at Mustafa's end. In the
We
meantime,
created
Vivek
a
sir,
very
you.
beautiful asset,
He's
and
back.
that is something which we used. Sorry, you could hear me?
There was a bit of pause. I think there is an instability at internet at your side. Now we
Oh,
can hear
okay.
you back.
Okay. Sure. Sorry, I might have maybe if you can move to Vivek and maybe I'll just check my connection once.
Sure, sure, Mustafa. Vivek sir, you would like to
Sorry.
speak on
Yeah,
something on
I was
corporate branding.
referring to what Dr. Sudhakar just said, and this is one of his clients is working on a product for short-sightedness. Request Dr. Sudhakar also tell their company that your client, we also need to look into the short-sightedness of the brand of the company owners of pharmaceutical companies. That's very important. And that short-sightedness of the pharma company owners, that's very dangerous. And coming back to the serious point, you talked about brand corporate branding, isn't it? You spoke a bit about corporate branding. When it comes to corporate branding, I don't know whether the NMC is going to be implemented or not implemented, but we all in the pharma industry should be prepared for that. Maybe the NMC will come in some new avatar, like NMC itself is a avatar of the old Medical Council of India. So probably in the new avatar it will come. But in the pharmaceutical industry, what Dr. Sudhakar said is a very, very, very point. Corporate branding will help you to overcome this generic problem. Okay, I have brand X or say aciclovir from Glaxo, or I have a brand of aciclovir from say Mankind. But what are the efforts made by the pharmaceutical companies? How much is investment in corporate branding? Very few companies can be recognized by that reverse A of Abbott. This sort of corporate branding has to take place. That's all.
Bang on. I think, Mr. Vivek sir, you mentioned very pertinent point, because if I see the NMC guidelines going to have some same consistency what they have currently trying to put it up, corporate branding becomes a very important factor, because ultimately doctors and even the consumers both knows these legacy of brands coming from which kind of companies. It's a very important point, absolutely. Uh, Dr. Sudhakar, I have a very interesting question in regards to the creativity angle also, and how you build exactly the emotional connection with the target audience in the pharmaceutical space that makes
Oh,
the brand as powerful.
that's a very interesting question. Uh, from our experience, of building brands, typically, uh, I'd have really loved to have a slide, but I'll try to explain as much as I can. Imagine a grid of high think and high feel, and you juxtapose it against uh, high think high feel. You juxtapose into four boxes, so you probably get box where it's high think high feel, and low think low feel as a box, and the other two boxes. So essentially, if you were to kind of look at campaigns, whenever there is a high think high feel quadrant, so to speak, uh, probably the example is high think high feel would be something like a cancer treatment would be that, whereas on the emotional side, you have the hair loss due to cancer, right? So you can have a cancer therapy, you can have a cancer therapy for hair loss due to cancer, and then there could be, in the low think low feel, there could be something. If I were to remain in the cancer thing, is low think low feel would be which cab to go for to the hospital, right? And then there's another thing which is low think low feel, where you are not really bothered about it. So when you look at this juxtaposition of things, right, we human beings react to it differently. So what has helped us is, if it is cancer, then giving a lot of scientific information, rational communication works very well. When there is feel, element of feel, emotional communication works very well. The third one, which is low think low feel, the communication that really works well over there is just a reminder kind of thing. And when it is high think but low feel, the communication that works is rituals. I'll give example. Toothbrush. If you want to build brand on sensitivity, for example, there was a competitor to VWash. VWash is a OTC product, but for a brand of, we wanted to go to only gynecologists. We chose to go to pregnancy as a segment. We created a regime called 9 regime stands for 9 a.m., 9 p.m., and you are 9 months pregnant, right? I mean, that 9 was a thing.
Wow.
So it became so you are enforcing two things at a time, right? That you are using it twice. Because we explain to doctors why intimate hygiene is very, very important in pregnancy, because there are a lot of infections and stuff like that. So it is ritualization works for us. Or for example, it works for diaper rash cream. Ritualization works. Clean cover regime. So those work. So I broadly in our field of work, either we are giving a lot of gyan, or we are touching the emotions, or we are creating rituals. These three things work very well for us in marketplace. And then you juxtapose it against competition. My product is better than your product. So broadly, these are the 4 things which we do. If you look at any communication, यही 4 चीजें होती है. And for other brands, it's just reminder. Low think, low feel. I would have probably explained it better with a slide, but that's my inability to express it that way. But this is what I hope I have managed to be as clear as possible.
Wonderfully portrayed, Dr. Sudhakar. I think it's a fantastic example for any pharmaceutical marketer to understand the magnanimity behind making the brand asset value, because every brand has some kind of credentials in it. I'm not talking about the benefits part of it, but overall on the campaigning part of it, because it has to be of simplicity. But Mustafa, yeah, I think you have some interesting point coming from Mustafa.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
I think it was well captured, Dr. Sudhakar. Now, if I have to relate a very similar example on the consumer goods industry, brands are based on functional plus emotional benefit. And again, it depends upon on which stage of the brand life cycle is, right? Like, for example, if your brand, which has just launched and it's a complete new innovation in the category, a lot of focus of brand goes into functional benefit in explaining the product, what is it, how it is used, right? But today, at the end of the day, every brand has to move a journey, right? While it starts with building awareness, but I think the end purpose of the brand is how meaningful the brand is. And that's the stage which every brand wants to go through, and that's the stage where the brand becomes an iconic brand. And if you look at some examples like Coca-Cola, right, it doesn't need to explain consumers today what is the product about, right? And they have a larger purpose, which is open happiness, and that's the communication which they go to. So they are completely into that emotional route and delivering that product experience. If you look at one of the brands which I manage, which is the Laughing Cow, it's a brand which talks about how do you inspire people to laugh in a very, very tough situation and environment, right? So connecting emotions to the product, it remains the key at the end of every a marketer, because that's the time where you create value creation for the consumer. There is no price to it. Like, when you are in a phase where you are just only functional, then you are not connected with consumer, and there is always challenges like value for money, for example, why I should pay X premium versus Y premium YouTube. But once you move away from functional to emotional, the value equation goes away, and there's a larger value which you create, and a product entire experience you create for the consumers, for your brand.
uh, Fantastically. I think this particular question was quite intriguing and have some good examples coming out of it. Another question which I would like to ask is, what lessons can the pharma industry learn from the consumer products? This is for Mustafa. And packaged food industry regarding the effective use of brand assets. Because what we believe in pharmaceutical industry, we see that there are thousands of brands, and when it comes to branding it or packaging it, uh, they are quite basics, but some of them are very smart into it, and they do some kind of good innovation, and that innovation helps them to have a better brand connect with the consumer directly. and they always perceive when going to a chemist shop that acha wo wala brand de dena mere ko. So that is what there is a value in it. But what is your point of view in terms of how that turnaround can happen in pharmaceutical industry?
See, I think if you look at today, the consumer goods industry, brand play a very very important role because you are directly talking to the consumer, right? Unlike what Vivek sir explained, today you have medical representative in pharma going to the doctor, influencing them, and doctor becomes the person who influence the consumer at the end of the day. But here in FMCG, it's direct to consumer marketing, and until your consumer is aware of your brand or trust your brand, he will not buy it, right? And hence, brand building plays a very very crucial role. Now, some of the ways I think I can look at in terms of how consumer goods does marketing. One is uh, using the corporate identity very well across the different brand name to create that consistency, right? And what you spoke with it was very well. I think packaging is the first and the foremost strongest form of communication, right? And it's also free branding because it's your space and you can do what you want and communicate the way you want the consumer, and that's the most seen visual identity. To give you an example, if you look at today Britannia, for example, right, while they have a lot of sub brands within that, which is Good Day, Golmaal, Winking Cow, the Laughing Cow, but they have always kept the larger identity and the architecture, which is Britannia, and they have created that brand name, which is trusted by millions of Indian consumers over the decades. So whatever they launch within that particular brand name itself, okay, it automatically gets the advocacy and the trust of the consumer. So the company and the organization doesn't have to spend time on making consumer aware of the brand, educate them also, or build trust, because the Britannia trust or the stamp is always there. So I think one of the things which at least I have seen in pharmaceutical industry is, and when I buy medical products, I honestly don't know from which brand they are from. And and if I know that it's from Dr. Reddy's or Bot, it gives a sense of trust and confidence to continue with the brand name. So I think leveraging the corporate brand identity and having that architecture across all your packaging communication is very, very key and very, very important. I think the second is how do you create, product experience and consumer experience, even if it's for doctor. One of the ways which FMCG does is humanizing the brand. And if you look at a lot of consumer goods company today use mascots as an brand asset, to build faster awareness and engagement with the consumer, right? And that plays a very very important role in not only in explaining the consumer but also driving that engagement. So if you look at Amul, for example, the girl is very famous. When you look at that girl, you don't need to tell consumer that this is an Amul girl. You already, consumers are aware of it, and that becomes your very very strong identity, and that also helps you to engage back to the consumer. Like if you recall, even the first Jurassic Park which was launched, and when they had entered the Jurassic Park world, uh, and there was a video played, there was an icon which used to explain how the dinosaurs were formed, right? We still remember that. So mascot plays a very very important role in terms of humanizing the brand, creating that engagement and building that. And uh, even if it's more functional, there are innovative ways of using a mascot even in the pharma industry to build a brand. So these are the two things which I look at in terms of doing that. Third, I think is very very important is your communication and your asset needs to be very similar across all your touch points. Right, that's very very crucial. Like for example, if you're using a certain visual identity on your packaging, that same translate into all your communication leaflets. It should translate into all your media communication. It should translate into everything. So consistency across different communication medium, even if it's internal or external, plays a very very important role in terms of building that identity and building the asset for the brand in the long run. See, we need to keep in mind assets are not built in one day, right? Taj Mahal was not built in one day. So consistent approach and having consistent communication and same communication again and again will help us to build that identity and that asset which will benefit the brand, the business in the long run.
uh, quite aptly said by Mustafa in terms of how a brand identity specifically can be maintained from different set of angles, not only in terms of packaging but also in terms of communication aspects. Also, Vivek sir, you have been a part of pharmaceutical industry. It's been more than 2 decades. You have seen the transition of some big brands where not only in terms of brand asset, also they have been seen that some of the brands have been transformed from one company to other also, but they're still their positioning, their brand connect, brand asset to the customer is still stagnated and quite strong. So what are the key elements which you would like to portray that why a brand asset in such kind of examples make perfect way of doing the marketing in terms of brand asset?
Before I answer that question, I would just like to add on to what Mustafa was saying on
Yes.
how FMCG can be used in pharma. When I was a school student and a college student, we didn't have TV, etc. But I still remember a radio ad. दाऊद के जूते जो फट नहीं सकते, जो घिस तो सकते हैं पर फट नहीं सकते. दाऊद के जूते घिस तो सकते हैं, फट नहीं सकते. I am remembering that after 50 years. Or you take since Amul is coming again and again, utterly, butterly Amul, utterly, butterly Amul. And I still remember another radio ad which I used to hear in the 60s and the early 70s. It came from all the people, it came from a government company that is LIC. And what I liked the most about that, a young man like me at that time wants to go to, wants to woo a girl. He goes to the father-in-law, and the father-in-law, he says, young man, you want to marry my daughter? Young man, you want to marry my daughter? But do you have an LIC policy? And as a young person, I was scared. The first thing I did was to stop dating my heartthrob. The first thing I did was to stop dating my heartthrob. And the moment I got a job, the first thing I did was to take out a LIC. So these are some of the interesting taglines of those days which are still embedded in my brain. Now, why I'm speaking of all these things? Today, in a doctor's chamber, how much time does a medical representative or a field manager get in a doctor's chamber? If a super consultant, 15 seconds is a luxury. If it's a GP or something, maybe 1 minute or so. And in this 15 seconds or 1 minute, how can I convey my brand asset, my brand message? And here, this is something which is very important for the pharma industry to pick up from the FMCG. Short taglines, very, very, very emotional, and at the same time, memorability. If I can remember something 50 years back, why not a doctor tomorrow? I still remember one brand which I used to detail in 1974 when I joined as a medical representative, and that was Colibex drops. I was working for a company called Carter Wallace, which is now Wallace, and they had just introduced antispasmodic drop for the children. That one tagline which our brand manager gave at that time, Colibex brings when tears, when the baby has tears, Colimex brings tears. When the baby has tears, Colimex brings tears. And that tagline, which went on for almost 20 years, these are the sort of the short taglines which should be incorporated in our brand messaging, and that alone can build up our brand assets. This is one thing we in pharma need to learn from the FMCG industry, white goods industry. Short, pithy uh, taglines which are also emotion.
Very true, Vivek sir. I think a perfect example of the current scenario where doctors are not giving more than 30 seconds, not even that. And more contrary, what happens is same molecule, almost five company people are standing for promotion of that brand. So how you differentiate that? That's something is going to be very intriguing idea. And brand assets provides that authenticity to that particular brand. Absolutely a right example, Vivek sir. Dr. Sudhakar, another important question which is coming in my mind is how can well-designed brand assets enhances the consistency and recognition for any, which ensures actually that pharma company stands out and avoid being mistaken from the competitors. The same example which we are talking about as of now, what Vivek sir also mentioned. So, what is your connect in terms of seeing from the creative angle of the brands?
So, I would like to, look at it. There are some brands which really require it to be really
Mhm.
hardworking, establish different identities, especially when they have a consumer component to it. Now, it brings us back to the most important question: what makes a great brand? And when I had put this question to Susan Cradle of IPG Group, she had answered that whenever a brand becomes part of culture, like for example, Xerox bolte hai na,
Hmm.
it's a
True.
cultural thing, right? Uh, I can think of Bernal, right? Matlab, memes में we jalan ko Bernal करते हैं. I mean that brand is getting used beyond its context, right? Uh, Pandemic में Dolo really stood for something. So when brands become part of culture, that's when they're at its peak. So that's really a holy grail for us, all of us to chase. Now I will to create in order to I'll just give an example. Brands mean different things to different people. We Mustafa spoke about consistency. I'll give you an example. Cipla Health is this brand called AKIB, Active Kids Immuno Booster, and it is when you talk to mothers, when you talk to mothers to buy it, you are actually talking about immunity. The hope is that when it is part of their tiffin box, the child can child gets vitamins. So that's a simple logic, interesting logic there. But it didn't work in doctor's clinic, that brand,
Mhm.
because doctors, first of all, one of the key things is when you're having a brand which is straddling both, you need little bit of doctor's endorsement and you need consumers to buy it. Getting doctors on your side is equally important. Otherwise,
Absolutely.
doctors
Absolutely.
psychologically they veto it. If a brand is unknown to a doctor, he vetoes it. Hai, faltu hai, bol ke. So, in this case, what was happening was doctors were raising objections. It is chocolate. Will it stick to the teeth? Okay, it is frivolous. So the doctor campaign that we created, the consumer campaign was done by someone else. But we strongly went and said, while there will be consistency of assets, what we need to take to doctors is that it doesn't stick, how it is useful, how it is clinically relevant, and we spoke about hidden hunger because that is relevant to that TG. So this is instead of doing nothing, you are part of and then compliance and stuff came in because it's in chocolate form and all that. So you have to essentially when brand assets are created, the same thing might mean differently for different people. Now another example I'll give. You have to also be cognizant of how doctors are handling a product, right? Gynecologists, when they suture episiotomy after delivery, they never touch the
Mhm.
suture with bare hands, right? And that suture is ordered by a nurse, so they are not playing any role. So it's a commodity, it's part of the process. So when Johnson & Johnson wanted to introduce Vicryl Rapid, then the whole thing about Vicryl Rapid was it was absorbable suture. It did not have problems like catgut, which was very sharp. When you cut catgut suture, it's very sharp. So no matter how much communication you do, it was not moving the needle, because you were trying to brand a commodity there. What we did is, students, medical students, when they learn suturing, they do it over stretched chamois leather and they practice. So we sutured two rows, one with catgut, one with Vicryl Rapid. We took it to the doctor and asked them to feel it with their bare hands. They always feel the suture with, gloves. They felt with bare hands, and then the clinical was presented. And we made it possible for doctors to appreciate that the pain which is there, the suturing also contributes to pain of episiotomy. The pain which is there, it's not necessary. But just because a woman has given birth doesn't mean that she has to bear that pain. It is not part and parcel of her life. You can make it easier. So we shifted a commodity to brand. So there are a lot of these examples where you have to understand what the problem is and then create brand assets to do it. And that brand asset could be a clinical trial, for example, which you do in a pithy way, or it could be a demonstrations have worked for us. Delete us, a brand, delete the tuss, it's a cough syrup. The whole premise of the brand was that 10 milligrams per deciliter works, anything less doesn't work. Most of the brands were 10 milligrams per, lesser than 10 milligrams. We created something known as a deletometer, electronic kind of display where COUGH was written. We put a dial there. The moment the dial goes to 10, then that cough gets deleted. So it resonated nicely with the brand name. So you use a brand name and a demonstration asset. It works. We have tried comic books. They have worked in doctor's clinic. The whole brand Neutrogen hand cream, we created a story. Norwegian fishermen never have cracked hands because the theory is that the oil from the fishes was what was keeping their hands soft in cold. So we used that as a story because that was the real brand story. It took 2 years to get approval for that story from Global, but it was worth the effort. So there are many things like that. Brufen Softra, when Brufen Softra was launched, people used to, it was a roaring success initially, but after that, doctors were not writing it. So when the medical reps came back and told us that, tablet bada hai, brown color hai, it is not in brand hallmarks, because Brufen was a brand pink, everybody knows Brufen, it's the imagery. But what really was the problem was doctors were writing Brufen, they were forgetting to write Softra. Unko lagta tha ki they were writing Softra, which is a more, lesser GI tract effect karne wala drug. They were not writing Softra. We created a calligraphy pen and made doctors write Brufen Softra in 10 different calligraphic styles, because we always say that when doctors write it 10 times, it becomes a pen habit. So we've tried that as well. So, you have to be a little innovative, try to find what the problem is and give a creative solution. So brand assets, get created. There are those essential assets which are, your monographs and stuff like that. I'll tell you a very recent case. Dr. Reddy's again, when Nerivio was launched, it's a device, it's the first ever device for migraine. We launched it. You know what we said? We are coming from Dr. Reddy's. We want you not to prescribe a pill. Here it is. And fortunately, that device looks like a pill itself, which you wear here. It worked. And how did we put it? We made it look like a pill otherwise. Drug monograph, sampling, we launched it like a drug, but it was not like a drug. So that causes dissonance. So essentially, you have to look at it as a problem solution. The asset which is there is an answer to that problem. So there are ways. And as Vivek sir said, आपको 30 सेकंड में नहीं मिलते हैं आपके 10 ब्रांड डिटेल करने के लिए. So the moment you do some things like this, that's when you get time. And now with digital assets, VR is working well for us. Packaging, unveiling is working for us. Getting doctors to scan QR code is working for us. At the end of the day, they are also consumers like us. So any interesting media innovation works there. But, you have to choose. I firmly believe you don't do innovation just for sake of innovation. There are some brands which you might, just need to stick to the basics. There are some brands which will work very well. And then again, if you're having a challenger mindset, don't do too many things, because if you're increasing the category, the leader will run away with it. So there are a lot of nuances which you have to do to own the category or to own the brand space. So those are some of the experiences we had.
It's a perfect way to exemplify the current brand asset practices which is happening by Dr. Sudhakar. Last question, but very significant. All this brand asset work has been done by a marketing team, a marketeers. So actually, this is a question basically from all three of you. How can a marketeer create a brand asset? We have discussed in a very subjective way, but what are the key elements they should be taking care of it while doing it? Maybe a different brand personality, a different brand and different creative theme, different specialty. But some of the basic elements they always look like to make sure they should do it. It's like a standard practice. What are the key elements you guys can guide marketeers on pharmaceutical aspects? Anyone? Mustafa?
Maybe I go. So, I think The first and the most important thing to build brand asset is to have a consumer centric approach. See, brands today are built at two levels. One is at the consumer and at the retailer. Here it would be more doctors, but in FMCG is retailer. So both are equally important. And I think today marketers needs to ensure that they understand the mindset of the consumer for whom this brand is, and at the same time they understand the mindset of the doctors as well. Because uh, for doctors, you need to explain the functional benefit, while to the consumers you need to explain the consumer relevant benefit. They might not understand the technicalities, but how do you simplify it and explain them and your end benefit. So a consumer centric approach is the key, and that's the most important starting point to build a brand asset. And what we do and what I use is a recipe of which is called, I call it as SMILE. Okay, where S stands for being original and surprising. One of the most important thing we need to remember is how is the idea more original and distinctive to your brand. M is meaningful. So while the idea could be distinctive, but how relevant it is for your consumer, and that also plays a very very key role. And for that, it's very important to understand, what is your liking for the consumer, who is your consumer, what is his preference, and so on. Third is it needs to be more intuitive. It means that it needs to be simple and immediately gettable. Because today we are exposed to a lot of communication, and hence simplifying the communication in the most creative manner. Like Vivek sir gave example, shortest line is the most important thing. You don't need to have long paragraphs or verbose statement. How do you creatively simplify the execution will play that important role. L stands for liquidity, which is the assets which you are creating. How can they build over different touch points? Even if I am looking at building a mascot, which is humanizing it, is it relevant for my brand? Can I build it across all the consumer touch points that we are using? That plays an important role. And the last one is how engaging it is. Is it has the potential to move the consumer response? So I think I use these parameters largely to say that yes, this fits, this doesn't fit, and this helps me to create some of the assets for my brands at my end.
A very very methodical way of identifying the right brand asset for any particular brand. Thank you so much, Mustafa, for that. I think now we are at almost the end phase of the discussion, so we would like to have some very important questions have been asked by the attendees. The first question I think is I think Dr. Sudhakar would like to put it up. A lot of brands in the space of kids nutrition still target doctors and mothers, while kids brand directly target, advertise, and engage with them. In this essence, can you share some insights on how the pharma should target kids? This is for all panelists, but Dr. Sudhakar has shown his
Um,
interest.
yeah. So a couple of things. We work very closely with Nestle, uh, Johnson and Johnson. So some of the brands that have been done. Now there are two, three components to it. The moment you are into pharma territory, it's regulated. For example, baby
Correct.
nutrition is very regulated territory. What you can do there is very interesting. For example, what has helped us is, we looked at National Health Survey and we did a segmented campaign. For example, in iron deficiency areas, we spoke to doctors that, your territory has iron deficiency. In SCCA areas, we talked about obesity. So there is a segmented campaign, and then you create assets accordingly, right? We have experience of, shaping the market. For example, if you're a Johnson and Johnson, it matters to you when the first bath of the baby happens. We worked with, Association of Midwives of India and doctors to create a protocol of how first bath should be given. So that's a big asset, right? You're creating a protocol. You're creating a thing out there. Massage as a category was dying for Johnson and Johnson because these days there are nuclear families, and doctors are very wary of allowing mothers to massage because you might end up causing skin rashes. You use wrong. We actually invested in training over 20,000 nurses across the country on how to massage and how to teach mothers to massage, because only then doctors were willing to write. We also conventionally you will talk about benefits of massage to the baby. We spoke about benefits of massage to the mother. So that was a scientific thing. Imagine a hardcore FMCG product. You cannot go and talk to doctors about this is my baby oil, right? You have to talk about massage as a category. You cannot talk about baby soap. You have to talk about atopic march, which is, if there is allergic reaction today,
Correct.
how it over a period of time results in us. So that's a continuum you have to do. So for doctors, you have to be rooted in science, give them the rationale, because really what matters is doctors should not veto it. So that's the pharma mindset I'm having. And then again, with consumers, you have to talk about how they are respected by doctors for the brand, and that's how you're building. So I'm talking about intersection of, wherever the pharma brands interact with doctors and how to do it. So that's the experience I thought I would share.
Thanks, Dr. Sudhakar. I think the answer has been quite significant for the question. Another question which has been come up is, how do you decide when the brand needs to develop assets around it? Can you suggest any step-by-step process to think about asset development? Dr. Vivek sir, any viewpoint?
Very interesting question. And I would say from the brand assets in pharma can be built up right from the day of introduction. And I would give a lot of importance to the brand name. Why? Because there are so many molecules available. I remember way back in the early 90s, I had launched a brand called Famocid. Famocid was famotidine, very similar to
Yeah.
ranitidine. And when you talk about the molecule, it is far, far superior to ranitidine. But it never made any mark. It never made any mark. At any time, the market share of all the famotidines put together was not even 18, 19% of the entire H2A, that is the H2 receptor antagonist market. So, what was the reason? What were the brand names of which I was also very proud during those days? Famocid, from the word famotidine and acidity. Then we had Facid. Then we had Famtac. We had Famonite. We had Famotin. Every brand coming had Famo. And that made the doctor very difficult. If today I was the brand manager for Famocid, I will never do that. So building up this brand asset starts from the beginning by giving a brand name. Coming to the same category, why is it that Zantac took the lead for many, many, many years, till about 3 years back when there was a controversy around its side effect? But what is the reason why Zantac became such a strong brand? Zantac is not a name which is derived from, it doesn't have any dictionary meaning. It doesn't make any sense to anybody. But the brand name has such a power in it. And I've also studied all brands starting with Z have that kind of power. And that's one of the reasons I thought, yes, brand has to start with the brand name. And one of the reasons for the success of Zantac and the failures of a much superior molecule that is famotidine.
Thanks, Vivek sir, for this. Another question coming is, as a brand manager, question comes from Sushil Parekh. How to understand what type of asset can work for the particular brand in pharma, especially in the prescription segment? And what classifies a brand to think towards asset development? Do you think it is a necessary for all brands to have asset? I think it's a good point. Mustafa, your point?
So I think what Vivek sir mentioned, I think was very apt. Firstly, to develop a brand asset is not necessary you need money, right? Your packaging itself is a brand asset. To understand what kind of assets works for you, it again starts with the word mentioned, consumer centricity. What does your consumer wants? What does your doctor wants, right? And that's the first definition to understand their preference, their liking, their disliking, what is the vision for the brand. So it's very important, when you take the brand to the market. See, consumer doesn't understand why are you using red color, blue color, yellow color, pink color? They will see the color. Okay, but the science behind using any kind of assets or visual identity depends upon the understanding of that consumer. Because each color evokes certain emotions, and so it's important for a brand manager to spend a lot of time doing consumer work before developing any kind of assets for the brand, and defining also what kind of assets you want. That would be my recommendation.
Very true, Mustafa. Anything you do or any act on any kind of brand, you need to have a proper research taken onto it, and then you take it right inside. Then you can work upon, be it brand asset, be it of any campaigning, anything else. So that's very important part of it. I think we covered almost all questions. Other questions we have already discussed. That's why I'm not taking to that. But it's a wonderful discussion today, which covers majority of aspects of brand assets. We also covered some very integration in terms of how FMCG is trying to take such important element of brand asset into their sections, and how pharmaceutical industry since ages is also using the same thing. Dr. Sudhakar portrays very well in terms of some of the key campaigns and how brand assets has a lot of significance even in the traumatic or surgical interventions also. Vivek sir mentioned some key and very important examples from the time when he was a medical representative. Mustafa very much well portrayed the overall connect and some very good process or methodical way to work upon on the brand assets part. It was an interesting discussion. I just want to have last consensus linings or some kind of summarization from all three of you on your thought on the brand assets part. I think Vivek sir, from, we
Okay,
can hear
then
from you.
this is my small, I wouldn't say advice, but a feedback or a take home. We have to learn a lot from the other industries. My submission, let us not be like a frog swimming only in the pharma well. Let's jump out of this pharma well, come into the open and see what the other industries are doing. Today, I've learned a lot from Mustafa. I learned a lot from Dr. Sudhakar, and I must really thank them for that. Jump out of the pharma well.
Fantastic. Really. Dr. Sudhakar.
See, from my experience, what I think is happening is we are in a very volatile situation right now. Uh, what worked for us, in past is not going to work. Uh, how do you, for example, one of the brands I want to sell is giving an economic rationale why this brand makes sense even though it costs more. Those are the kind of stories and assets you will have to build. So you might need a statistician to do the campaign for you. So what I'm saying is we are, especially pharma industry, we need to, and then that's part of, segueing into Vivek sir's thought that, we have to learn from other industries. That's really true because, the visual aid, the LBLs, nobody's looking at it. The conferences, and with NMC coming in, we'll have to still, wear new hats to figure out what is there. So I'm very excited of future. I don't know what answers we'll come up with, but, I think the core thought should be, let me not do conventional. To build brands, unconventional is the way to go. And I think from other industries is where we'll get some easy references to do that.
I totally echo your point, Dr. Sudhakar. We have to suck up our belt because this is a right example. NMC has given us a red flag. Now it will be changed something. So are we ready with that? That's a very important sign for us to understand and adapt some very good practices from maybe other industries. Yeah, Mustafa.
So I just want everyone to do one thing is to don't be afraid to try things. Be frugal in your approach. I think one of the best way to learn and understand is to try. Maybe try it in a small scale. Try it in one city, and see if it's working, and then scale it up. So the mindset of being frugal, being agile in your approach. See, there, sometimes I've heard marketing and brand managers saying, "I don't have money," and the thinking stops there. Okay, my budgets are low, I don't have money. But uh, I have not seen any company and any organization not investing in an idea which gives them a 2x revenue. So I think don't limit your creativity, and your at least your creativity to build the business by saying that I don't have money. There are and startup is a great example. Today India is said to be a unicorn. For startups, right? A country for startups. And if you have seen Shark Tank or different kinds of other platforms, people start their business at 25,000. At least organization provides millions or lakh of rupees. So that's a big amount of money. So don't restrict your creativity and thought process because I don't have money, even if it means that you can start small and then make it big later. So frugality and being agile is a key important thing as a mindset, and I would want everybody to live with that.
Thank you so
And
much,
also
Mr.
seek
Sudhakar.
good partners, good partners and
Yeah,
advice. That's equally important, because it's
yeah, because
co-creation.
Yeah.
absolutely, this is a very important fulcrum, because if you don't have a right partners, which will take your brand perspective in another level, because there are a lot of angles into it, and giving a right ideation and putting on the papers that gives the right angle to it is very important. As I mentioned, a key 3 or 4 word line also becomes very integral part of your brand asset. So how you create that with absolute lipstick is really important for it. It's a fantastic discussion today. Learned a lot of very important aspects from the every three of you being a part of industry for almost more than a decade. Excellent work. I think. Thank you so much. Be a part of this important session, and we will keep doing such qualitative sessions in the coming future also. And happy to be a part of the episode. Thank you so much, Doc Mole, to
And
make
thanks,
this session.
Udit. I think you have been a great host. So thank you very much. It was
Thank you,
great
Mustafa.
interaction as well.
Thanks. Thank you so
Thank
so
you.
much, Dr. Sudhakar, and as also Dr. Vivek sir. Thank you so much for your guidance and mentorship. Thank you.
It's great being here with Solwards. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Have a nice evening.